It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, and this is Planet Poet Words in Space, an edition of The Writer's Voice here at WIOX. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, and it's a real pleasure to welcome to the show by phone Hudson Valley poet, poetry presenter, and a vital force in our poetry community, Teresa Costa. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy you're on the show.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, my pleasure. I want to read for our listeners your bio, which I love. This is Teresa Costa's bio. Writing poetry for 5 decades, 2 centuries. Teresa Costa has done probably hundreds of poetry readings all over the Hudson Valley, in California and New York City. She is the hostess with the mostest and the domain owner of www.WOMPS.org, also known as Word of Mouth Poetry Series. WOMPS is a wonderful name. Costa has hosted readings since 2001, and recently, because of the pandemic, everything that was scheduled for 2020 has been hanging on by a thread. Hopefully, she will be able to continue in 2021, if not at Art Bar Gallery, then someplace else. Recently, her work has been recently featured in Gasconade Review, book number 5, and CAPS 20th Anniversary 2020, and Home Planet News. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Sharon.
And I had the tremendous pleasure of it was very exciting for me. My chapbook, Voice Lesson, came out in 2017, and I read it at the Art Bar, and you were wonderful, and it was beautiful space. And it was a thrilling experience for me. Thank you very much.
I missed the readings at the Art Bar.
Oh, I know. We'll talk about those later, your series later in the show, but I hope you can get back there. It's a gorgeous space, and it was very wonderful with with poetry and art at the same venue.
Thank you.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, Teresa, how did you end up in the Hudson Valley? I've seen something that says you're Brooklyn bred and Catskill Mountain raised.
We moved up. My father got a transfer from the Murray Hill Post Office to the old Kingston Post Office, the one that was torn down. He got a transfer there in 1965, and then we moved up.
So did you live in Manhattan?
No, we lived in the Cobble Hill section of Brooklyn.
That's right. I remember Cobble Hill now, right. It's very exclusive right now.
It was working class. When I seen it 4 or 5 years ago, I was shocked.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space, and it was like Carroll Gardens is also an Italian neighborhood. That seems to have been left alone. Maybe not now. I haven't been back in a while. I used to live in Brooklyn, too. As a young adult, and then as an older adult, I lived on Albemarle Terrace in Flatbush. So, but you were young when you moved, right? How old were you?
2 months after my 10th birthday.
Oh, that's old enough to really understand the change.
Yeah.
And what did you think about it? Was it
the move? I didn't like it at all. I spent my summers up here between 2 to 6 weeks up here from the age of 6 to 10. And then when I come home to find out, we're moving upstate, you don't have to start 5th grade. I'm like, I don't like that. It was more involved in the city. I had friends there and everything, and
sure.
I come up here, it's like, but it was more, I fell into it. I got very more into the nature part of it.
Yes.
Where we live next to the Atlantic Ocean, we're now next to the Hudson River.
Yeah, that's and that leads, of course, to the Atlantic Ocean. So you're never far from where you began. But you must have liked it because you're still here.
I fell into it after a while. It would take a few years for me to really get into it.
Right.
I mean, when I started writing, that's when I think I fell more into it. And I was 17 when I started writing.
Yeah, you were young. That's great. Would you read us a poem, please? Either about your experiences in the Hudson Valley or anything you want.
What poem?
Anyone you want.
You want me to read a poem?
I do. I do.
How about Life in the Woods?
Okay.
This poem was published in the Creature Comforts book, which came out in July 2013. It's basically written, all the poems in the book are basically written around my lifestyle here. Life in the woods, push-ups, jumping jacks, sit-ups, chipmunk-ups, Those furry little arms reach high towards the wood-shaded sky. You watch them every morning, banging their heads on your door, scratching to get inside, possibly psychotic, maybe rabid, treading up and down a well-worn, beaten path, cheeks stuffed with nuts, berries, forestry fruits. They tease squirrels, outsmart fox, rat snakes, dodge porcupine quills. Every morning you witness this. Every single morning. Like a wake-up ritual. Every single damn morning until you notice your blood pressure pills are missing.
That's great. That's Teresa Costa reading. And the name of the poem again?
Life in the Woods.
Life in the Woods. And what I love about the poem, it sort of moves like a chipmunk moves. It's
yes.
sort of concise and staccato, and it darts back and forth. It really does, and through the human eye. So, are you still fond of chipmunks, or?
No, not really. After they destroyed part of our garden, we got 2 cats, and they kind of they kill what they can.
Yeah, it's really strange. I used to love chipmunks. They're so cute. But now when you're up here, they're so incredibly destructive, and they're so willfully destructive that not very many people up here are fond of them. Some are, but...
Chipmunks are okay from a distance as long as they stay out of my garden.
So when did you write this poem?
I wrote it in August 2011.
You did, yeah. Can you read it again for us?
Sure.
Great.
Life in the woods. Push-ups, jumping jacks, sit-ups, chipmunk-ups. Those furry little arms reach high towards the wood-shaded sky. You watch them every morning, banging their heads on your door, scratching to get inside, possibly psychotic, maybe rabid, treading up and down a well-worn, beaten path, cheeks stuffed with nuts, berries, forestry fruits. They tease squirrels, outsmart fox, rat snakes, dodge porcupine quills. Every morning you witness this, like a wake-up ritual. Every single morning until you notice your blood pressure pills are missing.
That's so great. Hearing it twice is so interesting for me because you start very human, your push-ups and your sit-ups and your chipmunk-ups. You know something's going on here.
Well, we've
something
had a
different.
few come up to the door that were rabid a few times. We've dealt with a few rabid animals in our time here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't open the door if you have a squirrel banging its head on the door.
Good idea. Good idea. So, Teresa, you said you started writing poetry at 17. What was your impetus to write, if you remember, or why did you write poetry?
What inspired me, you mean?
Yeah, sure.
I was into a lot of music. I played the clarinet in school. I played the B-flat soprano, the E-flat alto. I liked listening to liked to play the jazz, but I didn't like to listen to it. And my friends at that point things started to change. I wasn't in the music class anymore. I was hanging out with a bunch of freaks. The cool kids that listened to music that was not of the radio. It wasn't commercial music. I got invited to a party and someone put on Captain Beefheart, which is West Coast avant-garde jazz, bebop with rock and some strange words and lyrics and everything. And I'm sitting there listening to it, and it's like, wow, this is cool. But those lyrics kind of stayed with me for a while. And one day I just picked up a pen, paper, and started to write.
Wow.
Of course, it never made any real sense, but to me it did. Until my parents found it.
Oh, that was, they found the record, you mean?
What?
Well, they found your poetry.
They found the poetry, and they wanted to know, what drugs are you on? I'm like, none.
Only the
no
best.
one writes this unless they're on drugs. I said, well, you've been on drugs too, huh?
People like work.
It was funny.
People work to get into that state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a poet's brain somehow is naturally attuned to to the odd and unusual, especially with inspiration. And
well, to me, it was strange how the music turned me on to writing.
Yes.
And the lyrics of something like Bottle of Ants. It's like, huh?
But it must have inspired you emotionally as well as intellectually, I would imagine, to get that impetus going.
Yeah.
So you were part of the Woodstock poetry community? You want to talk about that?
Woodstock Poetry Society. I have been part of them. I still have to rejoin them. Not really. I mean, there's a whole bunch of us that we all, go to a lot of the poetry readings, and you meet all the other poets.
Right.
And
Well,
stuff.
you were part of the community as a poet.
Yeah, I got to know a lot of the other poets by going to the other readings and reading other people's poetry and stuff.
And did it further inspire you, or did it?
Some of them did. What inspired me in the early days was a couple of years after writing, I would hang out in Rosendale on the weekends, and I ran into George Montgomery, who was a little-known, not a real well-known, but a minor well-known beat poet, and Ray Bremser, who back then was when he was alive, was more of a jazz poet than a beat poet. And I went to my first reading I went to at the age of 19. I get up at the reading, and it's like all guys, there's a few women, and the only ones reading were men, and it was in Rosendale, and I got up and read this poem that kind of rhymed in a way, but it was like the words kind of blended all in somewhere. I don't have any of my early stuff, or I'd read it. And after the reading, this guy gets up and reads, and they mention his name, and I'm thinking, are they kidding?
Wow.
Ray Bremser gets up to read, and I've read his work before, and I was kind of shocked, like, to see him there reading.
It is so odd.
I've never met
Rosendale.
anyone famous except Allen Ginsberg and Peter Orlovsky, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And he gets up to read, and then after on the break, he comes up to me and says, you really have a way with words.
Wow, that's some...
And it was like the first real thing that anyone ever said to me about my poetry.
How wonderful.
And it was such a compliment. It was like a powerful thing to say because no one else understood my reading, any of my work. I would get up in front of my humanities class and read something, and it was so like off everyone's head that the teacher had to get up and re-explain everything on the kid's level.
That's amazing.
Like, oh my God, is it that bad?
You didn't have the acknowledgement from one of the poets you admired. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I mean, we can later on in the show or now, whatever you want to do, you can read a poem by either one of them, by George Montgomery or Bresno or
I would love to read a poem by George Montgomery.
Okay.
It's a short poem.
Oh, please, go ahead.
It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
It was published in Home Planet News. I don't probably know the date. It doesn't have a date. Okay, it's called What's a Radish? What's a radish? Ray Bremser sat on my couch and tried to stay forever. I bought wine, and it became our blood, almost.
Oh, that's that's so intense. So they were good friends, too.
They became close friends. Ray came down he was up in, above Cooperstown.
Okay.
Where Ginsberg had the farm up there. I can't think of the name of it. He was up there, and he came down this way and ended up being close friends with George and going to the readings and hanging out with George a lot and stuff, and that's how I met George through Ray.
Fantastic. Could you read the poem? Would you read the poem again for us?
Sure.
Thanks.
What's a radish? What's a radish? Ray Bremser sat on my couch and tried to stay forever. I bought wine, and it became our blood, almost.
That almost is wild. And why?
Well, I can understand that poem because the first time I read it, it's like I could see that two different ways.
Tell us how. Tell how.
I could see when it states in here, and it became our blood almost. I figured they were probably beating each other up or something. They were both drinking heavily back then.
And it became our blood. But what a blood brothers almost, right? Like blood brothers. And why is the poem called What What's a Radish?
I don't know.
Which is red also, right?
Yes.
Well, maybe he thought he was a radish sitting on his couch.
Probably.
Who knows?
Maybe that's the way you'd seen him. Who knows?
You might. I love it. So, and that's, would you call that a jazz poem or a beat poem?
That's probably a beat poem by George. Ray's stuff is kind of long and drawn out and really crazy. I couldn't find any of his work. I have a hard time finding his work sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I did find Poems of Madness and Angel. Angel's a long, drawn-out story that I won't get into reading. Kind of makes sense, doesn't make sense. But I want to read a couple excerpts, a couple of lines from paragraph from Ray Bremser's work.
Oh,
he had a way with words that was kind of like a bit strange in a way, because I don't think he got past 3rd or 4th grade, and he was like a real juvenile delinquent.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think he learned to read and write while he was in prison. He spent a lot of time in prison.
He did. I love it.
In fact, he got arrested and thrown back in jail when he got married while out on parole, which was against the law back then, back in the 50s or 60s.
That's incredible. Do you know why he went to prison by any chance?
Armed robbery.
Okay. Wow, that's heavy. That's like
it's intense to read the bios. I love reading bios about the poets and stuff, but his was the one that stuck out the most.
I would imagine.
But when I would run into him and meet him in Rosendale, I was like, huh?
Wow.
Yeah.
And his name is Ray Brez. Can you spell his last name? Would you spell it for us?
What?
Bresner or Bresmer?
Bremser. Bremser. Bremser.
Thank you, of course. So, what do you have for us by Mr. Bremser?
So I'm going to read something off a poem that goes on and on and on, and I don't even know the title of it here. Blues for Bonnie, Take 1. And this is towards the end. Blues for Bloomers. Blues for Bryn Mawr. Blues for Vassar. Blues for Randolph-Macon in Lynchburg. Blues for Douglas. Radcliffe, Barnyard Blues for the Sweetbriar Blues, for Jews, for bras, for balls, for drawers, for the hills, for the halls of Montezuma. All bluer blues for all the girls in Bennington, the blues for news, for booze, the blue cruise, the blue bruise, the cool bruise, blues for Brenda Lynn, who's Bonnie, blues for two, and for what, who makes Bonnie blue.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is very blues, very,
Some
very
of his
musical.
stuff I can't even pronounce. It just goes phenomena, ominopona. Yeah.
Maybe he just made them
I wonder if he
up.
was also I never asked Ray, but I always wondered if he was sort of like inspired from the jazz music, because he was really into Miles Davis and all the bebop.
It sounds like that. The inner rhyming and the
beats,
vowels.
all the beat poets came from all that, the jazz and everything.
Now, was he before Ginsberg? Did he write before Allen Ginsberg? Were they contemporaries?
He lived up with Allen Ginsberg up on the farm, and he was good friends with Allen. The problem with Ray was that he was a heroin addict.
Okay.
And when he got down to Rosendale and ran into George, it was George's ex-wife who got him off the drugs and into booze, not knowing that he would be addicted to booze. What she did was she locked him in a room and fed him a sandwich, coffee, and a bottle of booze every day.
I guess
that was
that's
the only
better.
way she knew how to get him off the heroin. She didn't know what to do with him.
Good guy. Crazy.
Yeah.
Did he ever get off the
So
booze?
he went from being addicted to drugs to being addicted to booze.
I don't know which is
basically,
worse.
it ruined his life.
Yeah. What a good poet, and what an unknown. Thank you for bringing him to
What's
the
even
show.
more insane about him is that he was the same age as my mom. He died November 3rd, 1998. She died 3 days later.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
You know, it's like there was that whole connection. She didn't want to ever meet any of my friends.
Well, that's her
Don't
loss.
bring them here. I don't want to meet them. You know, it's like, why not? Why not? You should meet them. But she never knew anything about them, but she just didn't. I don't know what it was. She never really understood my poetry either.
It sounds like she couldn't relate. That's probably a whole other story.
I don't know who I'd take after in the family.
Well, probably somebody, but you've realized yourself in a way that she couldn't, I guess. I mean, who knows? But Ray Bresmer, that's a beautiful piece. And that you said you don't know the name. It's just a long run-on piece.
A lot of his stuff is long. It goes pages upon pages. It's from the original poem Blues for Bonnie, which was his wife. Take 1, January 1960.
I'm fascinated by him and George Montgomery and that whole scene. Did that influence you in wanting to host your own poetry series or shows? Did you want to present these poets on a broader basis, or how did that happen?
How did I get into this? I was working for Bernard Bavazzo. He has since passed away. He was an artist living in Saugerties. Working for him when he decided to redo some part of the building in his. He owned half of Cross Street in Saugerties, and he had this one room redone and said, "I'm going to have gallery shows here. I want you to host poetry readings." And wow. I couldn't back out of it. And so that's where I started hosting poetry readings there once a month. And then from there, after he fired me and I couldn't host readings anymore, the roof also caved in the same time he fired me. So then I would move around a bit. I hosted them at the Varga Gallery, at the Muddy Cup in Saugerties, Bohemian Book Bin in Lake Katrine and Kingston. And then for a long time, for a couple of years, there was nothing going on, and I tried to find a place to host the readings again. Mm-hmm. I had a real hard time around. I wanted to stay in the Kingston area, keep it there, not go out into Saugerties or mm-hmm. Port Ewan or anything, or Rosendale. Mm-hmm. I wanted to host it in Kingston in one main spot. And I tried about 30 places, and nobody wanted them. So wow. One day someone comes up to me and says, "The Art Bar Gallery, try there." I walked in and talked to her, and she goes, "Yeah."
Nice. 31 times, like sending out poetry, like sending out your poems.
And I do that. I've been doing that. I don't know if I've been doing it 4 or 5 years. I don't remember.
Yeah, it must be.
I don't really keep track of that. So I have 2 or 3 featured readers. We take a break, and we have the open reading, and everyone has 5 minutes to perform.
It's a great series.
And I haven't done it since the last time we did it was March 12th, when everybody mm-hmm. went out and hoarded toilet paper. We were having poetry reading. I had, I can't remember who I had. I had Matthew Spearing and Frank Wheatley, I think. I had somebody, and they were both reading, and somebody came up to me on the break and said, "I don't think you're going to find any food in the supermarket. Everybody's out shopping." I said, "Oh, God."
Right? How poetic is that, right? A crisis in the middle. You write a poem about that one.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if things calm down, you'll be able to.
A lot of the other poetry groups and stuff are doing stuff on Zoom, or they're doing them on, internet and everything.
Yes.
And my computer is Windows 8 with no speakers, so I figured by the end of summer, end of August, middle of September, I will have a new computer, and I'll have the cable set up, and I'll probably, if we're not going back this year, I guess I'll be doing the internet also. That's cool. The only thing I can think of.
Right. Like come the fall. In other words, you'll be able to set something up.
I do have pages on Facebook. I have the Word of Mouth Poetry Series. Mm-hmm. I have friends who like Word of Mouth Poetry Series, and I have poetry reading. And I tell people, if you want to post something on there of you reading or whatever, make sure you have a copyright if you type it up. Or just mm-hmm. go ahead and do it. If you can't, get a hold of me, and I'll see what I can do on the page there. Basically, I've been using the library until the COVID-19 thing. I feel lost. Go to the library a couple days a week and use the computer and
sure.
print stuff up and everything. And I come home and it's like, I'm on Windows 8. Now what?
Oh, boy. Well, hopefully that will change real soon when you get your computer.
Yeah,
and
I'm looking forward to a new one.
You conducted the Brainstorms New Year's Day reading with Bruce Weber, who had.
Oh yeah, the New Year's Day marathon reading.
Yeah, I was part of that. It was wild.
I was honored that he asked me to be part of it and to get. I didn't realize. I mean, working with him, I realized I don't really get my own poetry series out there as much as he had us working our asses off trying to get everything out there. It's like, whoa. I mean, I really worked at it.
Yeah. And
there was so much involved in trying to do this, and we pulled this off so well. I was amazed.
It was amazing.
It's not just a group of 7 people. You also get people outside that 7 group, and you would say get 3 or 4. Each one of us would get 3 or 4 people and say, you're in charge of getting about 10 or 15 people or 20 people or whatever.
I think you had every poet in the Catskills and Hudson Valley
I think so, too. I was really amazed by it. I was like, wow, we really did this.
It was great. It was 6 hours long, right? It might have been longer. I'm not sure.
And he's been doing this for, I don't know, for 20 years?
Yeah, at least.
24 years he's been doing this. And suddenly they moved upstate up outside of Saugerties, and he said, I'm going to do it in Kingston. I said, okay. Yeah. I never realized how much really there was involved in doing that. We've been going on like almost 10 months getting this together.
It was a major feat. Wonderful.
Yeah, it was. It was great.
Well, I hope you can do it next year. I think you'll insist.
We're going to get together next month, and we're going to talk about it. We don't know if we're going to do it like we did this past year, or we're going to go through the internet. We have no idea yet. It's up in the air.
Either way, it'll be great.
It will be great. I know it will be great.
You're listening to Planet Poet, Words in Space on WIOX Community Radio in the Catskills on 91.3 FM and streaming live on WIOXradio.org. I'm talking with Hudson Valley poet Teresa Costa. And Teresa, we're going to be joined now by phone from Manhattan with our poet-at-large, Pamela Manché Pearce. Hello, Pamela.
Hello, both of you. I'm enjoying this show.
It's wonderful.
So happy that you're there, Teresa. I have not heard the term juvenile delinquent, and I don't even know when I heard that the last time. And it was very refreshing. But you're also reminding me of how rich and exciting beat poetry is. And it's something that's not in the center of things, I don't think, right now, but we really can't forget about it because it's a very rich heritage, and it's very exciting stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff. What do you have for us, Pamela?
Well, I'm going to start this off a little bit differently today, and I'm going to read you a couple of sentences that will set this up, okay?
Sure.
Seized from West Africa when she was about 7 years old, she was transported to the Boston docks with a shipment of refugee slaves who, because of age or physical frailty, were unsuited for rigorous labor. In the month of August 1761, in one of a domestic, Susanna Wheatley, wife of a prominent Boston tailor, John Wheatley, purchased a slender, frail female child for a trifle because the captain of the slave ship believed that the waif was terminally ill, and he wanted to gain at least a small profit before she died. A Wheatley relative later reported that the family surmised the girl, who was of slender frame and evidently suffering from a change of climate, nearly naked, with no other covering than a quantity of dirty carpet around her, to be about 7 years old, from the circumstances of her shedding her front teeth. So this little waif turned out to be Phillis Wheatley. They named her Phillis Wheatley. She was the first African-American author of a book of poetry and created a sensation both in America and in England.
Amazing.
So she was quite something, and a very unusual set of circumstances. The family that bought her were very progressive Bostonians, and they taught her to read and write. they realized how brilliant she was, so they encouraged her. They taught her to read and write, and they encouraged her talent. I was reading this morning that by the time she was 12, she was reading Greek and Latin classics, and they removed her from all household labor because they wanted her to pursue her studies and continue to write. So she had remarkable support from this family that had brought her to do domestic work. They were evangelical Christians, and they wanted her. Many people at that time, who, Puritans and others, wanted everyone to read the Bible. This was the impetus for that. But it really took on a whole other life for Phillis Wheatley. Started to write. It really did, right? She started to write. Had a book published in 1773.
Wow. 1773?
1773, during, right before it all happened. And he took her to London, and she became a sensation. The book was published there, and eventually George Washington read her work and praised it, and Thomas Paine actually published or republished some of her poems. So she had this absolutely incredible life as a young person, and one of the other things that was remarkable about her is that she was the spark that led the anti-slavery movement in New England, especially in the Boston area. And the abolitionists grabbed her and were very, very, how can I put it, promoting, I guess is the right word. I can't think of a better word right now. They used her as an example of that a black person could be both artistic and intellectual. So they made as much of this as they possibly could. And, I when I read this again today, I've read this bio of hers before, but it's pretty remarkable right now, where we're all looking at happening in our country and just imagining all of this happening for her, and how progressive and what kind of good fortune that this family picked her up, And
Pamela, was she freed? Did she gain her liberty?
She was eventually freed. She was emancipated after all this hoopla with her books, and some family members died, and she was freed. But her life spiraled down terribly afterward, and she married somebody who couldn't really get employment, and they became working poor. Her husband became, it's a terrible story. Her husband became imprisoned, and she worked as a cleaning person, as a domestic, and but always continuing to write. Mm-hmm. So after she died in abject poverty. She lost 3 infants. She gave birth to 3 infants, all of whom died, and she wound up living in horrible, horrible circumstances, but she kept writing. So many things were found after her death. She's being vigorously studied now.
Great.
I mean, any material about her is really being brought to the light now. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read one poem, and I'm going to read it twice. And this is called On Being Brought from Africa to America. "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior, too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train." All right, let me read it again. On being brought from Africa to America. "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior, too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train."
That's some poem.
That's interesting.
Poem. I'm sorry?
That's interesting. I like that.
It's very interesting, and there are so many interpretations of this. They're really, I can see people really, a lot of brain power going into this. I mean, one version, interpretation is that it praises slavery because it brought her to Christianity, and she was a very devout Christian and very taken with precepts of Christianity. And the other is that it's a disdain for slavery. Because and she used her art to undermine its practice very consciously. The third one, which I liked it best, is that she chides what is the evangelical Great Awakening audience that Africans must be included in the Christian stream.
Right. It's very Blakean also.
It's very Blakean, and like Blake, she is saturated. She is she has the Bible is the great book for her that she learned so much from. So it's fascinating.
Pamela, thank you for bringing this indeed fascinating poet to us this week. Pamela Manché Pearce, poet at large for Planet Poet, and bringing us the poetry of Phillis Wheatley and her incredible life. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
When she said 1773, I was a little strung by that. I thought it was something from like the early 1900s.
Absolutely. It was very lean, right? The poem was very lean.
Yeah.
It didn't have any of the these, thous, and those in it. That kind of, which was common, I guess, in that period. When were you published by Post Traumatic Press? That was in 2011, correct?
No, 2013.
2013.
Actually, my chapbook was the first to have the barcode on it. And I was shocked over that. Oh, I get a barcode? Really? I was totally shocked. Really.
Yeah, it's poetry in the 21st century. My chapbook was published in 2017, and Allison Koffler and Dale Weiss are wonderful.
She was great, and Allison Koffler was fantastic, and when she was doing the final editing, she made a couple of, ideas and how to change a few things around and stuff, and I'm looking at it and said, yeah, you're right, I'll do that.
Oh, good.
But only because it made sense the way she explained it. No one else could do that. She has a way with doing that that's really phenomenal.
That she can get her hands around a poem and see its essence very clearly, I think. And could you read a couple of more poems? We do have time for poems. Maybe one more or two from Creature Comforts and
one more from Creature Comforts and that favorite poem you wanted me to read?
I love that one. But you have time for more than one or two.
I have time for two?
More than one, more than two. So you go ahead.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you just pick which ones and which order you want to read them.
Okay, hang on. Got it.
Okay.
Let's see. Life in the Woods. I did Life in the Woods. Black Elk.
Yes.
This was inspired by looking at the calendar and seeing what phase is the moon in today and what color is the day, and I'm saying, oh, it's Black Elk's anniversary death. It was written August 5th, 2012. Your death overshadows the tail end of a moon new for this month of August. 62 years passed and 5 before my incarnated birth. We were classmates and teachers in that last single dimension as our souls made one last decision. You stayed behind enjoying life without pain, without feeling, without affliction. I kept on moving through the stages, got reborn, reincarnated to a new world of pain and feeling. Only my world is now without the headdress of turkey feathers.
That's Teresa Costa reading her poem With Black Elk. And could you tell us a little bit about Black Elk?
I don't know a whole lot about him. He was, I guess, he was an important medicine man.
Yeah, he was a visionary.
Him and Lame Deer. And they had a grandson, I believe, grandson or great-grandson, who lived in Woodstock for a while, Clark Whitebird.
Oh, nice name.
Clark passed away in January 1998 in a really bad car accident. We knew him briefly, but I was really shocked when he was telling me that Black Elk was his grandfather or great-grandfather, and I'm like, really?
That's something. Really?
Yeah, and I believe it was because Clark was supposed to have been a medicine man himself, but he got waylaid into other things.
I heard that Black Elk as a child fought against Custer in the Battle of Little Bighorn. That's really the only thing I know about him, except that he's from the Sioux tribe and he was a visionary. And he, ironically, it's funny because of Pamela bringing in Phillis Wheatley, who was very religious.
Little big one.
I was reading that Black Elk converted to Catholicism. And
what?
He was, and they're thinking of making him into a Catholic saint. Or maybe he is one already. Isn't that strange?
Black Elk? Really?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is. But
turning everything Christian is a little bizarre.
Yeah, I know, but I guess, and he died in 1950, so I was reading. But your poem is filled with the spirituality of him. And when you say the line, "We were classmates and teachers in the last single dimension," could you tell me what you mean by that?
Well, let's see. I was at the Wittenberg Resource Center back 94 through 97, and I was taking classes, and then I was working on the side, so I couldn't afford the classes, so I did work in exchange for the classes, and I learned a lot through the late Betsy Stang and through Martha Davis. And they were more into the Native American, but they were giving classes on the clairvoyant classes, clairvoyant extensive. There was all kinds of things, spiritual classes going on over there and stuff, and I got in on a lot of that, and I guess it kind of ran into me one day.
Yeah.
Took over. I wasn't so much into the Native American as I was basically, my mother was still alive, and I was asking questions, and she said, start reading about the Celts, and then call me and ask me questions. And I did. But, yeah, I'm more of a very spiritual person myself. I kind of walked away from the Catholic Church because I didn't feel it would do anything for me. It didn't really, I didn't feel like it was doing anything for me, period. But going into the spirituality thing of things around me and stuff, I have a very strong connection with that.
If I'm correct, you wrote that Black Elk decided not to reincarnate, go through the reincarnation process.
The late Betsy Stang stated, in one class she said, as students we are teachers, as teachers we are students. We're always learning. We never stop learning. We're always learning. So when I came up to that one part that says we were classmates and teachers in that last single dimension. Oh, and the other thing about that was that some people seem to believe that a lot of the white people back then, around the 16 to 1800s, were actually part of the whole Native American thing, and that we reincarnated in different people and stuff. Some people really believe that. I tend to think there may be a connection there.
Well, there may be. I mean,
I believe in reincarnation, but there's so much involved in that. It's like dealing with the avant-garde. There's so much involved in that.
Teresa, would you read it again, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
With Black Elk. Your death overshadows the tail ends of a moon new for this month of August. 62 years passed and 5 before my incarnated birth. We were classmates and teachers in that last single dimension, as our souls made one last decision. You stayed behind enjoying life without pain, without feeling, without affliction. I kept on moving through the stages, got reborn, reincarnated to a new world of pain and feeling. Only my world is now without the headdress of turkey feathers.
Thanks, Teresa, with Black Elk. It's nice to read them twice. And let's go on to anything else you want to say about this one. The turkey feathers is the headdress without turkey feathers.
I don't know. That's what came to me.
Yeah.
I often wonder if I was a male in any of my past lives. I know I was a female in 4 of them. I don't know if I was a male.
Well, maybe probably. I mean, it's just two sides of the coin, the yin and the yang, whatever. It's all connected, right?
Yeah.
And I guess. Would you read the threatening poem, please?
Oh, the favorite poem. This was written October 12th, 2012. Threatening poem. I wanted to read that poem, the one with the calloused hands, the lines that ache for love, the sentences that pushed each other away. I wanted to read that poem, the one that threatened you. So I read it, spat on it, crumbled and shredded it, rewrote it to one word, then discarded it.
That's Teresa Costa, my guest, reading her poem, not the threatening poem. Threatening poem. This is wonderful. And it's Ars Poetica. It's a poem about writing poetry, about poems.
Basically, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the lines that ache for love and the sentences that push each other away?
It's kind of hard to explain that.
Yeah.
I think it's big, I remember when I wrote this, I was looking at another poem that got rejected, and I was really angry, and they sent it back to me if you would change this around and add this and whatever, and I got mad, sent it back and said, that's going to sound like your poem. You put your name on it. You do it. And I sat down and wrote the threatening poem. It's like, whoa.
Great. And this was printed in a publication called Up the River.
This was?
Yeah, that's what it says. I'm reading. Up the River, a journal of poetry.
I did. Sometimes I don't remember where my poems get published. You're right. It was Up the River that got published up in Albany.
Yeah. And so you wrote that in reaction to another I love that's such a poet's story. It really is. And so I'm always fascinated when you said you crumbled. Okay, so I read it, spat on it, crumbled and shredded it, rewrote it to one word, then discarded it. Now, what's the word? It can be anything the reader wants it to be, right? It could be an unmentionable word on the air. One of
it could
George
be any
Carlin's
word you
7.
can think of.
Yeah, and if you see it in print, it's very sparse. It's triple spaced, and there are very few words on each line. 3, 4, and 2, I believe. Except the one line's crumbled and shredded it, rewrote it. I like the repetition of, so I read it, spat on it, crumbled and shredded it, rewrote it, then discarded it. I love it because usually what poets do, they repeat words at the beginning of each line, right? Like in a flora. But this is the end of the line. And it makes it's very violent, actually, and it really puts the emphasis on the last word. Then
discarded it.
Yeah, then discarded it to one word. Then discarded it. Would you read that one again, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Threatening poem. I wanted to read that poem. The one with the calloused hands, the lines that ache for love, the sentences that pushed each other away. I wanted to read that poem, the one that threatened you. So I read it, spat on it, crumbled and shredded it, rewrote it to one word, then discarded it.
That's Teresa Costa reading her poem, threatening poem, the one with the calloused hands. And we do have time for one more poem. And how are you keeping yourself busy, Teresa, in this time?
Oh, I'm cleaning houses and weeding and gardening, and during the pandemic when I couldn't work, I took all my poems, put them in plastic sheet covers, and put them in 3-ring binders.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, I've been trying to do this for 30 years, and I finally did it, you know. They're not in order, but they're, you know, I could find everything I'm looking for.
That's great.
Basically doing a lot of gardening myself. I got a lot of cherry tomatoes and flowers coming up, and squash coming up. I'm real happy about doing the gardening thing.
Nice. How many binders do you have?
I got 5.
You have 5 binders.
And I got a few more poems that I'm going to have to put in there, too. I just haven't, you know, gotten around to it because I got into the gardening bit.
Mm-hmm. But there are probably plenty of books in those in those binders.
And I'm thinking of weeding out my books a little. I got a lot of books. Maybe I'm thinking of giving some away as presents and stuff.
Good idea. I've rearranged my poetry books. I put them in alphabetical order and weird order. So let's end with another poem, please.
I'm looking. A short poem?
Anything you want.
Anything I want?
Yes.
Making a face. At 6, 7, 8, I tried hard making a face, imitating the ugly look of fairy tale witches. Almost 50 years later, I am so much better at it. This was written when I was thinking back. I was trying to write a short memoir about my grandparents, and I remember looking in the mirror, making faces of witches, and my grandmother coming in and saying, if you don't stop that, your face is going to stay like that. And all of a sudden, the poem hit me.
Oh, my goodness. That's the words of wisdom that can paralyze one, you know? But it's sort of a crone poem, isn't it? It's great. I mean, it's... there's a realization there. Okay, once again, please, would you share that with us?
Making a face. At 6, 7, 8, I tried hard making a face, imitating the ugly look of fairy tale witches. Almost 50 years later, I am so much better at it.
That's great.
I love that poem.
Thank you, Teresa, for being on the show.
Thank you, Sharon. I feel honored to be here.
Oh, it's a tremendous pleasure. You're wonderful, vibrant poet, and your energy just comes right through the airwaves. Thank you very much. You've been listening to Planet Poets, Words in Space, an edition of The Writer's Voice on WIOX Community Radio. I'll be returning in a month on Tuesday, August 4th, with New York poet Dan Wilcox. And Dan read with me
He's
at
one
the
of my
Art Bar.
favorite poets.
Yeah, I can't wait for him to really get into his work. And I know he wanted to come in person, but we're not having any in-person guests yet at the station. So I hope that will be a phone.
I'll be on.
Guest.
I'll be listening to that.
Thank you. And it's so lovely that he's going to be on after you. And he was the co-feature reader at the Art Bar at WOMPS.
I hope to have you as a feature when we start back up again.
Oh.
I mean, I had a whole full schedule for this year, and I think next year, and maybe we'll do 3 featured readers.
Oh, it will be an honor for me to be part of the
I'd love to have
the
you
reading.
back.
Thank you. Again, many thanks to my guest poet, Teresa Costa. Thank you. And to Planet Poets, Poet at Large, Pamela Manché Pearce. And thanks so much for listening. Stay happy and well.